Okay, auto roll. Time being a little after 6 o'clock, we'll open the zoning board meeting for the month of January, now Tilton. And one of the first things we would normally do here is review the minutes, but however, I think we'll put them off until after these cases have heard, as much as some questions have been raised. And no telling how long it'll take to deal with them. Another thing I need to advise the applicants, we don't have a full board this evening. We're one short, and therefore the option is yours as to whether you wish to continue this till next month, because you will need an affirmative.
We need three. So we're going to go forward. Okay. We're going forward.
You're going to move forward with it? Okay.
Yes.
You understand that you will need 3 affirmative votes for any award. Okay? See, it's everybody read this first case, so they're somewhat familiar with it. We can move forward. Okay. And the first case being a ZBA's case, first of the year, 1201. Appeal of administrative decision for the Lockmere Meadows Affordable Housing of the Planning Board decision on November 8th, 2011, determining the applicant is required to seek a density variance to change the footprint, but not the density of the previous approved site plan per Article 7, Section C, Table of Dimensional Values. Property is located at Lockmere Circle in Tilton, in the mixed-use district, tax map R10, lot 7-1. The first 2 cases here, I'm going to suggest that we deal with both of them at the same time, because conversation is allowed to go back and forth. Is that agreeable to everyone? Okay, so that would be the second case also, which would be case 12-02, variance for the Lockmere Meadows Affordable Housing. A variance is requested from Article 7, Section Appendix C, Table of Dimensional Values of the zoning ordinance to permit construction of 19 dwelling units within 3 multifamily buildings on 4.648 acres, where the current ordinance allows 2 dwelling units per lot in the mixed-use district. Again, tax map R10, lot 7-1. Does anybody have to, in any way, disqualify themselves for listening to this? No? Okay, in that case, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. For the record, I'm Regina Nato. I'm an attorney in Laconia, and I'm here on behalf of the land use applicant. What I'm going to do is, because we're combining the two issues, one is the appeal, one is the request for the variance, I'm just going to give you my handout, mostly not for you to read, but solely for you to look at the pictures and the exhibits as I'm going through this. This was actually prepared by Russ Tebow from Applied Economic Research, and he will be speaking while I'm talking about the variance request. In both applications, I gave a brief chronology of what has gone on with this site. This is a property located on Route 3. Back in 2005, the planning board gave us an approval to construct 47 residential units on this site, which is approximately 16 acres. The original approval in 2005 consisted of 7 multifamily structures. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 remaining here. At that time, it met the zoning ordinance density provisions. In 2006, the zoning ordinance changed, and it roughly cut in half what would be the allowable density. But during this time period, since the original owner obtained the original approval, he had put in approximately $800,000 worth of site work to the site. He'd expended a considerable amount of money. By 2008, the applicant went in and asked to reconfigure 19 of the previously approved units. These 19 right here were initially to be housed in large three large structures. We were able to get an approval where instead all of those units would be freestanding, 19 individual buildings. That occurred in 2008. After the zoning change, we maintained the exact same density of what was approved in 2005. We're not required to get a variance, presumably because the board felt that our right in density had been vested. So we got an entirely new site plan approval. Within that year, another approximately $7.5 million was spent on this site, completing the original 4 buildings, the looping road, which is quite substantial, the water, the sewer, and even the utility hookups for this backland, okay? All of that was grubbed and prepared for these units. Since that time and the economic slowdown, the state legislature amended the law, which used to give us 4 years after we've substantially invested in a project, 4 free years, so to speak, where you're immune from any zoning changes. But if you've substantially completed a project, you are forever protected from zoning changes. Which is why in my narratives I'm explaining to you that we have completed to date 28 out of the 47 units, all of the road, which was to serve all of the units, all the stubbed-in utilities, whether the buildings that they were to serve have been built or not. Based on the price tag and based on the actual physical improvements, it's very clear that we've completed at least 70% of this project. And for that reason, I've argued that we're exempt from that zoning change once we so substantially performed, and therefore it wouldn't need a variance. I've added to that the fact that the planning board in the past had taken that position, saying, you know, when we went to go from the 3 individual units to the 19, which is where we are today. We came back to, Steve went back to the planning board several months ago, and this, you can see that these black shadows is our proposal to now go back to 3 freestanding multifamily buildings instead of 19 freestanding buildings, and the size of the proposed units are actually smaller than what was initially approved in 2005. So, to cover all the bases, I filed both an appeal of an administrative decision to say that we don't really agree that we need to come in for a variance because we believe we're vested. But to the extent that we've been directed to apply for a variance, I'm prepared to address that criteria as well. I always try to start off with the hardest part of the variance criteria, even though it's number 5 on your list, which is hardship. Okay? Under this evolving standard for hardship, I have to show that there are special circumstances associated with this specific project. And as the court cases have evolved in the last 3 or 4 years, they've allowed the boards to consider the financial impact of a particular project or a particular regulation. We couldn't do that 10 or 15 years ago. So what's unique about this property and the circumstances is the amount of infrastructure and expenditures that have already gone into this property that are specifically dedicated to those remaining 19 units. And so that's what makes this unique. The second prong of it is whether or not there's a fair and substantial relationship between, in this case, the density rule and my project. And when I look at that second prong, which is a newer prong, it basically means translated, does it make any sense to apply this rule to this project? And I use an analogy all the time. Let's say somebody comes in for a sideline setback variance. If the purpose of the variant, the sideline setback is to create a buffer from a neighbor, and let's say your neighbor is a 500-acre conservation trust, then it really doesn't make a lot of sense to apply your 10-foot sideline setback. By analogy, I would say in this case, the planning board concedes that if we could afford to do it, we could today still build those 19 freestanding buildings. It's just the change in the configuration that they're saying now we need a variance. So if the purpose of the regulation I'm addressing is to enforce density restrictions, it doesn't make any sense because we could build 19 anyway in a different configuration. If you look at the other remaining criteria, there's a question as to whether granting a variance would be in the public interest. Now, the master plan speaks to most of the plan goals under the ordinance, and I found two very direct provisions. One is that it's one of the goals under the master plan to promote the availability of affordable housing, which is what this project is. The other one is to promote open space for a multitude of reasons specified in the master plan, everything from environmental to aesthetics. What this does is, if we were to be allowed to go back to 3 multifamily units, which are smaller than what were originally approved, we would be eliminating a significant amount of lot coverage. We would be creating more open space, and certainly we would be finishing up our affordable housing project. So certainly granting the variance would be in the public interest. For the same reason, and nowadays the court seems to combine these two prongs, the spirit of the ordinance with the public purpose. And for the same reasons I just cited, which is lot coverage, open space, affordable housing, and we could build it anyway with the same density, but with a higher impact. It should be within the spirit of the ordinance if you were to grant the variance. And finally, there's a question as to whether or not there would be substantial justice if you were to grant the variance. And as I've said, the town really has little, if nothing, to gain to refuse our ability just to reconfigure a footprint when we could already do this density. If their goal is to, if the sole purpose is to limit density, we could do this anyway in a different configuration. So the town has very little to gain. Conversely, we have an awful lot to lose. It's significantly more expensive to build 19 freestanding units. This economy has been tough on everybody, especially those people who rely on grant money, and the people that are driving these grant monies are looking at every penny that goes into these projects and the most efficient way to build them. So if you look at the benefit to the town that could be achieved by not granting this variance versus the hardship to us, I think the scales tip in our favor. And what I would like to do is I'm going to reserve a couple minutes at the end to answer questions, but as I mentioned earlier, Russ Tebow is here, and he'll address the final prong of the variance criteria, which has to do with the impact of the project on abutting properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Members of the board, good evening. I am Russ Tebow. I'm president of Applied Economic Research, and Regina Nato asked me to take a look at the possible impact of the 19 units as presently configured and as previously approved on the value of abutting properties, which is one of the criteria that you look at. Some of you may know me. I've been in the Lakes region for 35 years, running applied economic research. We do general economic consulting, real estate appraisal, and this type of work is something that we do very frequently. I believe, in a nutshell, that this development, the 19 units of attached housing in 3 buildings, and also going back to the previously approved plan, the 19 units of detached housing, neither of those will have a significant negative, measurable negative impact on surrounding properties. If you look at the report that Regina passed out, if you could just refer to page 6, that's an aerial view that does show the existing 28 units and the remaining 19 units where they're located. Excuse me, in relationship to surrounding land uses. When I do a study like this, each situation is unique. So you can't sort of look it up in a cookbook and say it's a A or a B or a C. So you have to evaluate, if there was going to be a negative impact, how would it be transmitted to the abutting properties? One of those is land use compatibility. And as I point out here, the conventional wisdom in the marketplace, what people think, buyers and sellers think, is that residential uses do not negatively impact the value of commercial uses. If anything, sometimes it's seen the other way around. If somebody builds a Walmart in your backyard, you may get a little bit upset. In this case, that's not the situation at all. The second element would be traffic. And to the extent that a new development creates a lot of traffic in a neighborhood that's not accustomed to having a lot of traffic, you can have a negative impact on property values. In this case, there's substantial traffic, of course, 18 to 20,000 cars a day traveling on Route 3. And other than Route 3, this development will have no impact on the local road system at all. Route 3 is state maintained, heavy traffic. So there'd be an imperceptible difference in traffic as a result of this development, both town-wide on Route 3, and there is no access along local streets at all in terms of traffic. In terms of noise is another possibility where a property can impact values. I've been asked to address noise issues, for example, in gravel operations, where you get pounding big rocks and turning them into small rocks. There is a lot of noise. Some manufacturing activities create noise. Some alternative energy developments create noise because of cooling towers and the fans that they run. In this case, the noise in the neighborhood, speaking just from my experience, really emanates from Route 3 traffic in terms of abutting property owners. And these units are really innocuous, have no impact on noise levels. And then in terms of visual impact, if you look at the map on page 6, the air photo on page 6, actually the existing units and the proposed units are located well back from the other properties. And as I mentioned before, residential uses are not really considered a nuisance use to abutting properties. They're relatively innocuous, not a major impediment to the value of surrounding properties. And in addition, the units are set well back from abutting properties here. You might be able to see a little bit of the 19 units from the back of what had been Lucky Lenny's Hardware, the storage area. But that's about it. The property is well screened. The surrounding land is by and large vacant land with the exception of the land along Route 3. So I just reiterate my conclusion. I don't see any significant, really any negative impact on surrounding properties, abutting properties, as a result of this proposal, either in its proposed configuration of 3 buildings, 19 units in 3 buildings, or 19 units individually. Neither of them would have a negative impact on value. And in fact, it's hard to say because as I get older, my memory is not as acute as it used to be. But this is a very clear case where that's the situation. One of the clearest. I don't want to say the clearest because I can't. There may be one, but as I stand here tonight, I can't remember another situation where I've been asked to address a zoning board where the case is as clear as this. The use is not offensive. It's well screened. There's already significant non-residential land use in the neighborhood. So I just don't see how this could have a negative impact on surrounding properties. And be happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding my segment, if it's appropriate now, Regina.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to say something else? Regina?
I think I was just gonna conclude by inviting questions. I know you still need to talk to, give the public an opportunity for their input, but just to recap what I said in my narrative, which is, we've got 2 appeals here pending, and this is a good project. We've invested heavily in it. We're so close to being done. And you have 2 ways to give us a remedy that we seek. If you decide in favor of us for one of them, you don't even necessarily have to make a decision on the other grounds. But that's entirely up to you, and I'm happy to answer questions when you want me to.
Okay, now that information was also in your memorandum that you included with the papers. The fact that either one or the other would suffice for you. You get any questions at this point in time?
No, I need to discuss this amongst the
I think you've kind of covered everything quite clearly, and just in my own research and going over it, I'm pretty much aware of everything you're saying. And the question that certainly come up in my mind as to why you weren't considered vested to begin with.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
As to why you weren't considered vested to begin with. Okay, relative to the letter and the latest meeting with the planning board. Because all the reasons that you mentioned, it does seem to lean in the direction that it would be vested. And I haven't found anything that would speak to the fact that it wasn't. The appeal of the administrative decision would seem like it would address this issue right up front and avoid having to deal with a variance from the view that I have at the moment. I would ask if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, actually, the counselor mentioned that there's 2 options here. Actually, I consider it to be 3, because I can't find anything in here that would, especially in the minutes of November 8th from the planning board, that would require either a variance or an appeal from an administrative decision. That meeting on the November the 8th was categorized as other business. There were no abutters or public warned about it through notice or anything else. As far as I'm concerned, it was could be considered a conceptual in and of itself, because it was basically a discussion back and forth between the parties and the planning board as to whether or not a variance would be required. And as far as a requirement for a variance, I have to agree with the applicant in that I believe this was permanently vested right from the beginning. I can't see a need for any of this action whatsoever, either of these options. I might be wrong, but I might be missing something, but I don't know why we're even here doing this.
Could I explain something procedurally? We had difficulty ourselves because Steve went, and I specifically wanted to submit a site plan application. And we asked permission to do that without all the complete engineering, because we suspected that this density issue was going to come up. They wouldn't grant us a hearing to decide whether they would deny jurisdiction for density. So I had, so now we're back in the exact same situation where if you don't give me a decision that says I think that they're vested, or at least we're going to give them a variance, if you don't make a decision, then we go back to them and they're going to say, no, we told you, we're not going to accept your application.
I agree with you. I'm ready to make that decision myself personally, based on what I've read and seen. And I took a tour of the place myself. And I can appreciate that the new proposal would actually require less space, a smaller footprint. But everything I can see is it has been permanently vested, and I'm ready to go that way myself. But I mean, I don't know whether I've missed something. That's all. I just threw that out. I don't want to be pitting this board against another one, and I don't think we have to go there, you know. But I think the planning board did their job. You folks came in and addressed it. There was a letter that came in from yourself, I believe, Counselor, that they were reviewing, and discussion back and forth about where you should go with it. I can't see any grounds for any of this, personally.
Well, but it would resolve, we'll open it to public and it would resolve the situation as far as an appeal, the appeal for the decision. Granted, I mean, the subject came up here at that meeting, and that is what laid the question open for discussion, if you will, and brought it here.
As far as the requirement for variance?
Well, yeah, would that be the case? You have any questions, Marina?
No, I'm with you
Yeah.
guys.
You good?
Trying to understand.
But to appeal an administrative decision, I don't see that an administrative decision was actually made here.
You're right, an administrative decision was not made. The question was brought up, and that being a zoning question is why it ends up in our lap.
Yeah.
Okay. So, that thought we added. Nobody has anything else. Let's open to the public and see where it goes at this point in time.
Sounds good.
So this time I will open it up to the public for comments and discussion. Jane?
Yes, I'm Jane Alden, I'm chair of the planning board. And when Steve came to us, it was a meeting for a conceptual view of the project. There was no request to give a site plan, so they wanted to build 4 buildings as opposed to 2. There had been a change in zoning, and therefore we suggested that the zoning board be approached about that issue only. There was no hearing, even discussion of a site plan. And there are 2 selectmen who were here that same night, and it was conceptual only, so I don't know why it's ended up this way either, okay? Just wanted to make that clear.
Well, I'm not sure what you just said. I mean,
No, we just had
you're on
we had
one
a
hand saying
discussion.
that you sent them to the board. Well, you're sending them to the board for an ordinance decision.
Well, because the zoning had changed.
I understand
They
that.
were saying that conceptually they wanted to build 4 buildings. And according to the information we had,
What do you mean by that? I don't follow what you're saying there.
that was how Steve explained it to us. Was that not correct?
3 buildings.
3 buildings.
3 buildings, okay.
Okay.
And there was room, I'm sorry,
aware-
there was
okay.
room for the 2. That's why we suggested that they talk with the zoning board first before they came to us with a site plan. Since the zoning law had changed.
Well, the zoning law change would not have any bearing on it once it was, if they were considered vested.
Well, that vesting did not enter into the conversation.
But that is a fact.
I understand that tonight, but
Did
it
the
was
board-
not broached at the night of the meeting that we had, for the conceptual meeting. It was merely a discussion, Steve, was it not, about what, and we suggested that you,
We're talking about our first meeting.
Yeah.
First meeting was definitely conceptual.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a
the only
second
meeting
meeting.
that we
though.
had.
There was a second meeting.
True, I
No,
understand.
when
what
was there a second meeting?
When was there a second meeting?
The November meeting,
Where we specifically asked for a
came-
decision.
and we got the letter.
Right, he came again at the end of another meeting that we were at. He wasn't on the agenda, he just
Okay.
came in and had a discussion with us.
But to ask for a decision without warning the public is not proper.
We
No,
wanted to.
They did,
They wouldn't accept they wouldn't accept it to even open up to discuss it. That was our issue.
If I could just jump in, just, because I agree. My sensitivity is your comment about not pitting board against board. I mean, really, all I really wanna do is do site plan review. We still have work ahead of us with your community to do site plan review, and the question really was, well, in order for us to do site plan review, you need to address the density issue. We believe we're vested. I think they were unsure. We're here kind of discussing that. What we're looking for is some confirmation of that so I can go and do site plan review with the planning board. I mean, that's the basis of this.
Sounds simple enough.
Yeah.
it is. And keeping in mind that the only way we can address that as a board is in one of the ways in which the board can legally operate, and that would be either an appeal to administrative decision or variance or a special exception, whatever the case may be. So they've come here before us, they've made the application, so we have to respond in some form to resolve the ordinance question. That's the way I would
Well,
view
if
it.
that's the case, then I would suggest using option 2, the request for a variance, versus the appeal from the administrative decision. So I don't think an administrative decision ever occurred.
Okay.
But I would,
we can
so
go
I
that
would
way.
recommend.
They don't really care at this point in time.
No,
That,
if you're
which
looking
one
for a
or the other.
vehicle, that's the one I would recommend.
It certainly is that, there's no question about it.
I'm just thinking out loud because I appreciate anything that you will do. Does this town have a 1-year expiration on variances if they're not worked on? Because I'm vested now. If you agreed with me for the administrative,
No, we don't.
so they don't expire.
Well,
A variance? You're talking
We-
special exception now, that's,
we just started, as of last year, they have we can put that restriction on them. But
Mhm.
that's at our option as to whether it will be put on there.
Okay, I just wanted to
Okay.
mention that.
I'm not yawning, I'm sorry. I have a question,
Well,
I
I
guess.
assume you want to talk.
Well, I guess it's a question, I'm just curious, and I apologize for not being completely familiar with this project. But my question is, we're talking about vested interest and density. And my understanding is that the original site plan that was approved was for single-family homes?
The original
No.
was multifamily.
Well, I mean, they were.
It was almost
single
similar to
build-
what's there.
Single buildings
No,
No.
it was almost similar to what's there.
Original
Well,
is
so-
right there.
from the beginning, but the site plan
The second one
that's in existence right now, because there
has individual units.
19
Individual
19
unit.
individual units.
so they would have a vested right, a vested interest in the density of those buildings, correct?
Well,
But
density is number.
I know what density is, and
And
I'm gonna pose this question to the zoning board, if that's okay.
Oh, I'm
But
sorry.
I don't mean to apologize.
I
I
thought you
don't
were
mean to
asking
be
me.
rude.
I thought you
No,
were
I'm asking the
Yeah,
zoning
comment
board.
should come through the board.
I'm
anyway.
posing the question to the zoning board. So if the current plan for those single-family units,
Current proposed plan or the current one that's now in
the
effect?
one that's now in effect,
Okay.
that is yet to go to the planning board and be changed, correct? The one that's in effect. If there's a vested interest in the density that those buildings represent, if they change the buildings and increase the density, would there still be a vested interest?
Not if they were increasing the density. If they were looking for 20 units, there'd be a problem.
Yeah, when I heard single-family versus what is there now, which is multi, I didn't know if that would change the density
Actually,
of the existing buildings.
Mrs. Dawson, you go back to the original plan with that you're looking at right there. That was the beginning of their permanently vested interest
Well, no, they changed it.
status.
When they changed it to those single-family homes, they changed that vested interest because now they have a site plan approval that they
I
requested.
don't think they changed the density at all. They
Well,
just changed
that's
the
my
configuration.
question. that those single-family units, do they represent a density change?
No,
When you're going from those to the multi?
no,
That's my question.
okay, thank you.
So
No,
the density
same
is, the
density,
density's the same,
different configuration.
whether it's in the single family or it's in the multi. The density's the same.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But
Is that part of the requirement that the density has to stay the
No.
same in order for it to be the same vested? To be vested?
I would say yes, it would, because if they came in and wanted to do a whole new site plan, or change something to either 15 units or 25 units, go one way or the other, they're changing the entire
Then
site
it
plan.
no
at that
longer
point in
becomes
time.
vested and they have to come in and redo the,
If it became approved or disapproved, however it went, but it would be something that would have to be then looked at to start the process all over again, whether it would become vested upon the approval of the board.
see, according to RSA 674:39, you know, once that project has begun and they've invested a substantial amount of work and money and construction, which they had done, then there are a number of exemptions that are contained in there. One being that subsequent changes to density requirements don't affect them.
what's confusing me is they go from this configuration back to the other configuration and then there's yet a third configuration. So which configuration really is it on the original plan that was site planned? Which actually plan is it? Do we know?
The way
That's a question.
the way I would see it at this point in time, each one was approved with 19 units,
Right.
whether they be the 3 buildings or 19 individual units. Okay, so the time frame, the 5-year time frame would start from that point on, and the last one being in '08. So we'd be looking at their vested interest good till 13. If I read that correctly.
I think the latest proposal was the one that she showed with the
Yeah.
darkened units, the 3 darkened units.
Which
So-
falls in between those 3 that are up, that was the first plan. And so our new proposed 3 will actually fall within that footprint and be smaller. So we
Actually
actually
smaller.
have gone back to the original plan and just
Sure.
decreased the
Right.
footprint.
I just want to make sure I got that straight. Plan 1 and 3 are the same.
Yes.
Plan 2 is the only one that's different. So you're going 1, 2, 1.
And
That's what you're actually doing. You're going 1, 2, 1.
Yeah.
The third plan is
Except
plan
that
number 1.
3 requires.
So you're going back to what it was originally granted.
That's correct, yes.
Right.
It would
Only
be.
they're decreasing the footprint.
Right. And if you wanted,
Correct.
I'm sure that they could
Correct.
increase it, which,
And that
The
would be
original.
handled with the planning board, not here.
Right. And-
Footprint is the footprint, that's strictly site plan.
and it's obvious to me, and so I'm going to take off, that the board is in favor of having them get what they want, but there's an administrative problem. I abut the majority of their land. I abut everything on the south side, and on the north side, I have a vested interest in most of that land. So I abut a lot of it, and Kevin, if he were here from Fast Cash, would probably agree with me that the project that we've done is an incredibly nice project for the area. To do anything to stop them from bringing more taxes and finishing their project is ludicrous. And if it means a decision of a board to take the chance that it's the decision that may have to fall back, I think they should be allowed to go forward and that the board should work it out. But there should be nothing that keeps them from going forward. It's not their error. I thank you very much. Happy New Year to you
Thank you
all.
for your comments. Anything else from public at all? Going once, going twice? Okay, then the option is back to the board and where we want to go with it. Any further discussion relative to the issue here at hand?
Well, like I said, I think we should go for option 2, if we're going to do that, because that is platform.
Okay, but that,
And, trying to think if there are anything we should condition on that.
the
We
variance
do-
itself,
Yeah. I need a minute for this.
you know, unlike, like home option two, that certainly does take the decision whether there was a grounds for an administrative decision out of the picture.
That's pretty rough line on your back and everything.
Thanks a
Take care.
lot.
Happy New Year.
Thank you for your thoughtfulness.
I guess the one thing in my mind is to go with the variance option. Normally it's said that we don't set any precedent, but by granting a variance for this type of density at this point in time, is any future development that would take place, not necessarily just on this project, but any other projects. Would they not be looking back on whether variances were obtainable for a change in density after it already went into the ordinance? In other words, it's been changed in the ordinance now to where 2 units per lot. Okay?
No, I don't see a problem with that. I mean, I'm looking at the grandfathering aspect of this, and the new applicant wouldn't have that advantage. They would have to come in under the current.
They would, but if they weren't getting what they were after. And then they come back and they look at what has been done elsewhere in that particular zone or whatever. Can it have a bearing on that in some form? I mean, it just seems like in the past, when I was in the office here, that that type of situation developed a number of times over the years, where they came in, they got all the previous minutes for all the meetings to see what type of things had been developing from the different
We
boards.
should stipulate that, the appropriate RSA in our decision.
In other words,
As the,
stipulated that it's primarily,
as the basis for vesting the density.
okay, okay. As it was, the reason for the decision would be the fact that it's believed that there was a vested right, vested interest in it at this
Exactly.
point in time, and for that reason alone, the variance would be granted. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. That's exactly what I'm saying.
You have anything to add to that? How about conditions? You want to put any conditions? I mean, we have that option now that the year restriction, that something has to happen. But in this case, so much has already happened. The road's in, the infrastructure's in. So I mean, would it prove anything to put that kind of restriction on it?
I don't see a need to, personally.
I don't think so.
I've been up there and looked at it, and it's ready, you know.
Yeah, I also have made the trip up there.
Okay.
I guess if there's no other discussion, I guess, I want some kind of a motion?
Yeah, trying to think of one, how to put it properly.
You're fully aware of the fact that what we're talking about here is in no way related to site plan
Right,
stuff. That's strictly between you and the board and.
yes.
This allows us to get to the planning board to do site plan review.
Okay.
Are you actually referring to this as phase two? Which is basically the completion of that circle?
It's been
It says that
called
on the
that.
plat here, pardon me.
If there's a way to distinguish it from what has been done, we can call it phase two. But it's all part of the same integrated project. If it helps you with a motion,
Anything would help me right now.
Or final phase,
How about you just, if you wanna use the final phase, yeah,
final.
that's gonna be final, that's all the site plan's gonna permit anyway.
mm,
Completion of the final phase with the variance being granted for the final 19 dwelling units to be within 3 multifamily buildings. As presented to the planning board.
Joe, what do you think of that? Granted variance. Variance is granted to complete the final phase of construction consisting of 3 multifamily units totaling 19 units.
19 individual, 3 multifamily structures comprising 19 units. How's that?
Anything else in there?
Consisting of 3 multifamily, why don't we change this units to structures? And then
Yeah.
comprising 19 units.
Yeah, sure, that unit's always in there. Yes. Shown in the plat.
I don't think it's really necessary.
I mean, I could say, there's shown dated September 2011.
Why would we get into that really?
Yeah, we don't have to
The
really-
variance is there forever and runs with the land. I don't think you need to go any further, I think, you know, the map, and everything is still identifying.
yes, may I just ask, I know
Sure.
you're in deliberations, but my concern is if we go back to the planning board and they say move the building 5 inches for some reason, that they'll send us back if you approve the plan. But if you give a variance for the density.
Right, I know exactly where you're going with that, yes. I don't in any way want to tie this in with
Site
planning board stipulations or anything
Right.
else. This is strictly
density.
for the density requested. That is also vested. Ed, you want to mention anything about that?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Yeah. Variance granted for the 19 units.
Discussing the final phase of construction consisting of 3 multifamily structures.
The 19 units.
We got some business.
Take care.
And I'll hear you on the committee.
Once in a while.
why do we, variance is gonna be a variance, we don't really have to mention vested in it. That's not gonna prove anything one way or the other. Just leave it out, I don't think it's gonna prove anything. It doesn't mean anything at this point in time. It would be if we went with the appeal. The variance is strictly for number 19. So it's, we're just strictly with that.
That's true, you really don't have to. Very more specific than that.
Unless you're trying to, unless you're trying to somehow associate it with that which was originally vested. Would that be where you're trying to go with this?
Hmm.
Now look at this again.
Yeah, sure, you can read it.
I don't know, we're working too hard at the most, I think we gotta keep it simple.
Go with what we got.
Yeah, it just seems like we're just stumbling over ourselves trying to come up with
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
technicalities.
you could make it a mile long, I don't think we
Right.
accomplish much more. Okay, I'll make that
Okay,
motion.
why don't you lay it out there, see if we can get a second.
I'll make that motion. I move that we grant a variance for the completion of the final phase of construction consisting of 3 multifamily structures comprising 19 units.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
There we go, now you have to live with it.
You're
Forever,
the
forever.
planning board. Thank you guys for all your help. Appreciate it.
I'll be seeing you again.
Thank you. This was for your file.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was impressed. I took my first ride up here a few days ago. Beautiful job.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Gonna be quite an area.
Did you get that motion and everything? You want to read it back to us?
Variance is granted for the completion of the final phase of construction for 3 multifamily structures comprised of 19 units.
What was the last part?
Comprised of 19 units.
Right, okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, good job.
Okay, we're down one to go.
I was trying to write it into hearing aids.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You have it on tape too?
Yeah. But. Let me take those folders, Joe. Are they very simple?
Be careful, please.
Sorry?
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Like the Waltons.
Night, John.
Oh, yeah.
Good night, Tom.
Okay, same.
This is John Boy though.
No.
They're both subject to the same thing, so
What are you, coloring book?
Yeah. In between.
Oh, yeah.
You signed it, John.
I haven't know.
I already did. I didn't know if I could get over to you. But you can sign it if you want to. Sign it.
Well, this is the same thing.
Your opening statement is,
This is the first thing. This is gonna be the first thing, 50%.
as you review this, can I speak now?
No, no.
Not yet,
Oh, sorry.
we're not ready, we're not prepared yet at this point in time.
Hello,
Hi. How are you tonight?
I'm very well, how are you?
I'm okay.
Good. I'm just being friendly.
Nice, no problem.
She owns property in New England.
Oh, fine, understood.
It's my neighborhood.
It was right near, Rocky Meadows. She's the Perry's.
So, they bought the back one with that long stone wall, that old big hole.
That isn't related to,
They got 12 acres.
what's the first one?
It isn't?
No. No, that would strictly be if they were gonna go into the wetland setback.
Oh, okay,
So, and that's not the issue at this point in time.
I see, thank you.
Okay, if we're all ready, we'll move on with the next appeal. For a ZBA case 1203, appeal of administrative decision, 570 Laconia Road LLC, by the planning board, that parking and driveway is not allowed
What did you?
in the side setback, under the side set,
In the side setback.
in the side setback, under the side setback. Wait a minute.
Did I mess it
I've
up?
got it
It
here.
looks like you wrote it twice.
Oh,
Under the side setback exception that allows 10% of the setback to be used for an accessory use. In relation to Article 7, Appendix C, Table of Dimensional Values. Number 2, property located on Laconia Road in the mixed-use district, tax map R9, lot 53. Like the last one, if it's up here to the applicant, we'll deal with both of these at the same time, because
Fair enough.
there will be, they'll be intermixed, so.
Okay.
Also included, this will be case 12-04, a variance for 570 Laconia Road LLC. A variance is requested from Article 7, Appendix C, Table of Dimensional Values, number 2 of the zoning ordinance to permit parking and driveway in the 20-foot side setback. Property located on Laconia Road in Tilton, New Hampshire, in the mixed-use district. Tax map R9, lot 53. Mr. Bernard?
Yes, sir.
The floor is yours.
Why, thank you. The first thing I want to point out, which I noticed today, is that it says the applicant fails. It actually should say the applicant meets the test for granting the variance. So you all have a copy of this, I assume, because I submitted it. So it's just a change in the word, which is a big deal, but I don't know if you guys are even reviewing that, but I wanted to point that out to start off, because we're doing them both at the same time. So,
Make sure we're on the
I don't even see you have that page, so maybe I'm all set.
I've got both cases right here.
Okay, well, we'll get to that if we bump into it again, how's that?
Okay.
All right? Basically, what I want to start off by saying is that in the past, there has been a 10% setback clause in the zoning which allowed for accessory buildings, and then I've seen some parking and different things like that. When I brought that in front of the meeting, I was trying to get some parking within the wetland setback, and that really wasn't what the planning board wanted to see. So when I pushed the parking back, I got into the 20-foot setback and thought I would be within my 10%, which was allowed. So that was the first thing I would ask for, is what is the zoning board's position on the 10% that is allowed in the zoning regulations? Secondly,
Position, you mean how we interpret it? Is that what
yeah,
you're saying?
I am. So what I'm basically saying is that if you're allowed an accessory building in the setback, but you're not allowed to park in that setback, it gets a little confusing, because that means, well, if you put up a shed and you park underneath the shed,
it's acceptable. So I'm saying, I would like to do the same thing, but without the shed. Hey,
I hear,
Looks good.
thank you. I mean,
I hear what you're saying.
it's a logical,
Okay, we'll get to that.
Okay.
But you continue
all
on
right.
before we get into the technicalities.
I'm watching you. Okay, so then, at that point, if you don't agree with that, this actually meets the test for granting a variance anyways. And the first RSA, which you have to meet upon authorizing the appeal in specific cases, a variance from the terms of the zoning ordinance, if the variance will not be contrary to public interest. And I don't believe this is contrary to public interest. If you look at the plan, you can see that there's an outer building, I'm going to point it out here so we all know what we're talking about. There's an outer building that's owned by the town right now. And there's no windows in this, and the parking would be along the side of the back of that. So I don't really see how that would affect public interest because of the situation that there is already out there existing. Would a substantial justice be done? I believe so. With the 20-foot setback and the 20-foot boundary line, it basically renders all of that property useless. It's like a 40-foot swath that you're unable to do anything with. And I don't think that by allowing nothing to be going into that, I don't think any justice would be served, especially for myself as a landowner. Would the values of the surrounding properties be diminished? I would like someone to be able to point that out to me, how that could happen, when we already have a building that literally on one side has 0 setback, on the other side has 3 or 4 feet. So I'm trying to work my way through this. I'm probably not being as eloquent as the other ones were, but I'm not an attorney. I'll make that perfectly clear. And so the purpose of the setbacks is to allow for open space and to eliminate congestion and fire protection. We're not proposing a dwelling there, so no fire protection hazard is there. And there's a parking lot, basically is open space. And again, I'm just reading down through this. I hope you guys are going along with me.
That's fine, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm in B. In this case, the subject has I have a large wetland that creates a large setback throughout the whole property. And so I've moved away from that, and I am still looking for just the 10% or so in the setback. So again, I'll state out because the variance is asking for parking, fire separation doesn't really make any sense here. It's not really an objection that should be looked at it for that reason. And again, as far as the property being congested, we're out looking for 6 parking spaces. It's a large parcel, almost an acre, and there's a large part of it is wetlands, which creates a large buffer zone, so there really is no question, there's no congestion in here. We're not trying to squeeze, a bunch of cars on top of each other. This is just a small parking area. So there will be no congestion. There's no health and safety issues. I'm going to read this whole thing. I paid an attorney to put this together, so I'm going to take my time and enjoy it.
The floor is yours.
Thank you.
I'll let you know when we start the overtime.
Yeah, I'm watching. I'm trying to see if people's eyes are closing and glazing over here, so I'm trying to read my audience. Substantial justice. That's a $50 word. Because of the physical configuration of the subject property and the wetlands and the town's possible land that abuts back that is in question for any reasonable use of the property, I don't really know what he's saying there, but it sounds all right to me. By not granting no granting of this variance will not benefit the town or any other or greater determinants to the property. The values of the surrounding properties will not be diminished. The parking will benefit everybody, relieve some of the congestion of what is going on out there.
It's interesting that you say that. You say everybody. Is anybody who uses even the other structure that's on that, the town structure?
Yes, Say that question again, though?
The way you said that, everybody,
Yeah.
you mean even people who would be using the town structure that's next to that? What do we refer to that building
Senior
as?
center.
Excuse me? Oh, senior center, that's right.
I would think that that would be used as an overflow. It seems like any parking that's available out there is being used for that at different times.
Okay, but that is your statement now, that it would be available for overflow from that if necessary. Is that what you're saying? Yes or no?
Right, let me get back to you on that one. If there was space available, yes.
Sounds like Mitt Romney.
Can you define it? That would be Bill Clinton.
Depends what it is.
Yeah, that's what he said. Thank you. It's really all right here. You did a good job. I don't know if I need to continue to read these, or if you have all read them.
No, I think you
I
need
need
to,
to
for the
continue
record,
to-
you need to go over these
Okay.
things
I'll keep
for
going
the
then.
purpose of a
All right.
variance.
So again, it says, here we are, it says, owning for special conditions of this property that distinguishing it from other properties in this area. No fear of substantial relationship exists between the general public purposes in the ordinance provisions and the special applications of the provisions to the property, and the proposed use is a reasonable one. The special conditions of this property includes the physical layout of this property, the wetlands and the wetland setbacks that overlap, the building setbacks and the abutting town property was subdivided out of this property at an earlier time. The town property is developing with existing structures that are very close to the property line, and the property is in developing commercial zone on a heavily traveled highway. The general public purpose of this part of this ordinance is setback is to provide open space and fire protection. As discussed above, neither of these ordinance goals are met by applying the ordinance setbacks to this property. The purpose used is a reasonable use in the circumstances because of the lot location of the commercial zone, the double road frontage, and planning that allows for flow-through traffic if necessary, and the access on less traveled roads to move parking away from the heavily traveled highway, creating less congestion to passing automobiles. The test 2. An unnecessary hardship will be deemed to exist if, and only if, owning a special condition of the property that distinguishes it from properties in this area. Property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance, and a variance is therefore necessary to enable a reasonable use of it. I, the existence of the extensive wetland on the lot limited the area of development. Land dedicated to this use, this land for a reasonable use in a commercial zone. That this variance must be granted to allow the parking and the driveway and the setback along the town property. Otherwise, reasonable use of this lot will be severely restricted.
Restrained.
Restrained or restricted? What is it? Restrained.
Now, just based on that last statement there, what percent of this lot approximately is wetland?
I can tell you that if I think about it for a second.
Can you just wag it?
Yeah, but I'd rather be a little bit. I'm gonna say it's 50-50.
50/50?
Yeah, it is. 50-50.
So this really doesn't, this little bit of use really doesn't relate to a reasonable use of the lot being restrained.
Well, it does because of the way the wetland runs across the lot. It gives you an additional setback that you normally wouldn't have. So in other words, you have a 20-foot setback from the front, and you'd have a 20-foot setback from the wetlands, which really does restrain the property for its.
A valid point. Both the wetland setback and the side setback tend to overlap, if you will.
They do. And it really squeezes the property down.
Mhm.
You know, if the property could be developed reasonably without being here in front of you, I certainly would have done that.
Is it likely that this driveway that we're talking about, that will continue on to the other portion of the property that is dry?
It all is in dry portion. There's no wetlands being disturbed for the driveway, so
No,
it all is
I realize
contiguous.
that. But if we continue going back beyond where you're showing the parking,
Yes, if you did,
is it likely the driveway is going to continue on back
it
onto
could,
the property?
it could.
So which would be additional parking or whatever you wanted back there too?
Exactly. I mean, at some point, there'll be a building also, you know, on this building at some point, a building on this property at some point.
Could be, sure.
Yeah, and it's, you know, anybody who has a lot in the town would retain that right to develop it.
Yeah, you made that point with your barn.
Yes.
Knowing that there's still a considerable amount of the lot that is dry and usable for parking, why would you necessarily choose to park here when it's really not even near your building at this point in time?
Well, meaning the building that exists there, is that what you're asking me?
The
Or
building that you currently have your little businesses in?
It actually is pretty close. It's only like 60, 70 feet away from it.
Right, but I mean, it's not next to you. You're gonna have parking on that other, on the rest of this lot back behind
Yes.
the town shed and the area all the way down, which I'm not even sure, how big is this lot? You have quite a bit of information off your plan, you know.
It's .97 of an acre, the entire lot is.
Okay.
And there's over 20,000 square feet of it, which is
Wet.
wet.
Okay, yeah. So really, we're taking away setbacks and everything from that too, because that is going to affect the last 20,000 square feet you have.
Right, you have very little.
So you really have, you're really getting narrowed down quite a bit there from that, from what you have.
Exactly.
You might not even be able to put a building on it. Not a point.
It's .9 acres, did you say?
.97,
.97.
actually, .97 of an acre.
Is that one
Just
lot?
Yes,
Did you subdivide it?
yes.
It has two,
Two lots, yeah.
two lots.
No, wait a minute. This lot we're talking about.
This only lot we're talking about is .97 of an
0.97.
acre.
So his other upper lot, or his easterly lot, is not part of this discussion
Correct.
at this point in time. So we're in a way, we're truly talking about hardship of wetlands, taking away half the lot. And then in addition to that, the setbacks all around what's left, take it away even further to the amount we haven't even calculated, but it certainly is shrinking up the amount of lot of that lot that is really usable.
And what happens is because of the configuration of the lot, it comes in a pie shape, as you can see. Because of the configuration of the lot, it really, they meander all over the place, these setbacks from the wetlands and the setback from the boundaries, and that's exactly what you're saying, and I agree with you, and that's what's going on.
Inasmuch as I made the point here momentarily about the fact that you'd be losing additional setback area around the dry area of the rest of the lot, are we gonna see this same question come up again
No,
relative to that?
no, you won't.
So the parking, so in other words, the rest of the lot setbacks will not be
No, they work.
encroached on, is what you're saying?
They work.
Other than,
You have to have a driveway coming in, and you encroach on setbacks as a driveway comes in.
right, but I mean, the ordinance, getting back to your very first question here,
Yes.
I've had a problem with this for a long time where it just makes reference to accessory buildings. To me, buildings are just that, buildings.
Oh, setback thing.
You know, as opposed to structures that are actually created by man. And I don't consider an earthen driveway a structure.
That's a whole nother question.
So, I mean,
Yeah, let's suppose you had a driveway right up next to your property line, and you decided to buy an old deteriorated school bus drive it in there and park it for storage. Now your neighbor's gotta look at that. Hence, we have a reason for the setbacks, right? Amongst other things, because people actually do that sort of stuff. And we've only allowed 10% of that setback to be used for outbuildings.
Accessories, I think is a.
Again, you put the, let's say it's 10% or 10 feet on one side, 10 feet on the other, you got a 20-foot, area that's a buffer area that's protected from junk or whatever's parked there. Not necessarily that, but, that's the reason why we have that.
Agreed.
Have you opened this to public,
It will be momentarily.
Again, the first thing that I said and the first point that I make is if you were to build a shed over this and park underneath it, it would be allowed in the zone.
Oh, no doubt about it.
You'd be
Just the shed.
way over your 10%.
I don't know, it probably wouldn't be.
No, I don't think so, a lot.
The lot's huge, and it goes all the way around. You take all your butter, I'd be way less than, no, Bob, I'd be way less than 10%, I believe. I'd do those calculations. But let's just say that I wasn't. I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Here's the whole lot.
He's talking 2 driveways here.
Yeah.
And that's a whole lot.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes, you are.
You gotta wait your turn.
Okay.
Don't lead them to believe it's only one bar,
I'm
John.
not, but you have to wait.
He's coming in.
Bring that up.
Yes.
He's coming in over here.
Are you with this or against this one, so?
There's a couple of
Thanks,
things.
Jeff.
So,
Keep that handy.
I think one thing that appears to be fairly evident here is that the area that we're talking about probably does comprise 10% or less. I mean, I haven't measured it out, but when one looks at all this, this, and this, and this, but here again, it talks about accessory buildings, not accessory use.
Right, and I was just making that as an example of where that is a little,
Ambiguous.
yeah.
This proposed driveway and parking area, is that gonna be impervious or?
No, it's gravel. It will always be gravel. And if I was to pave it, I would have to come back in and do it, but I wouldn't, unless there was a compelling argument for me to gravel it. The first 10 feet of it, I believe it is, has to be paved, because that's a state road. And when I got the permit to come in off of there,
We have to
you have to have an apron. So there'll be a small portion of that, but
That's also part of the front setback, so you're allowed to penetrate the front setback with driveway anyway.
right.
So that's really not the issue. The board have any more questions
I don't,
at this point?
I'm good now.
Okay, we'll open it up to the public. Ms. Goss. Mrs. Goss, excuse me.
Just to the structure definition, the town's definition comes from one of the state definitions, and specifically as it pertains to airport zoning, which is runways, driveways, means any object constructed or installed by man. So definitely a gravel driveway which is installed by man would be considered a structure. I just want to make that point.
It doesn't say
What
structure,
RSA
it
is
says
that?
buildings.
Pardon?
It doesn't say structure, it says buildings.
Well, if you look at the definitions in our zoning, it refers to accessory buildings, and our definition of accessory buildings is just that. It's definitely a
I know what you're saying.
building.
Having gone through the legal ramifications once a couple of years ago, when I was in a different capacity here, it was pointed out from a legal point of view that the actual wording itself in the definition is just a definition. Okay, the ordinance is the ordinance, the definitions are the definitions for clarification for certain aspects, but they don't become the governing rule.
No, but they're certainly
Okay,
there
the-
to clarify
The ordinance
the
does.
ordinance.
Right.
Okay, I'm gonna read you my arguments, and I think they pretty much cover just about all 5 of those. The impact of, this is number 1, the impact of granting a variance to 570 Laconia Road LLC would be contrary to the public interest. The well of the abutting property is less than 6 feet from the abutting property line where the setback variance is requested.
Wait,
The well.
Well on your property.
Yeah, that drilled well for the Grange?
That is a.
That's right, it's right on the outside corner there, yeah.
Right. The New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services requires today that wells may not be located within 50 feet of the right-of-way of state-maintained roads, preferably more, and wells may not be placed within 75 feet of adjacent property which you do not control. So by granting the variance, that driveway and parking lot would definitely be within 75 feet of our well. And that comes from environmental fact sheet.
I have a question relative to the well. Doesn't the water line run there?
No,
It starts right at the Grange Road. I've talked to them, we can bring it over there if we wanted to.
Oh, that's good. What about the sewer line?
It goes there, yeah.
That goes past the Grange.
We're
doesn't
hooked
it?
up to the Grange.
The other question that I would have regarding the well, how close is it to the road?
Well, yeah,
well, regardless, let's not compound the issue by now putting a parking lot beside it and a driveway.
No, but.
And I'll get to that, and
Oh.
it's my turn.
Oh, yeah.
that's correct, but do me a
Yeah,
favor.
you'll have time for rebuttal.
I need you to make it clearer to me where the well is.
Okay,
That's easy.
this is Grange Road, this is the property that's requesting the variance, and Pat will try and what the well is.
I know you did.
And there's
Okay.
2 granite posts right here.
Can I ask one question while you're doing, where do you guys propose to park?
That isn't a question here.
You know you're gonna park right there in front of it where they do it
No,
now.
it's not an issue.
It will
It
come up.
isn't.
Is this a drilled well?
This
or
is
this
a,
dug well?
this is a drilled well. It is an artesian well. It is a bedrock well. It has 3 names.
Well, it's an artesian well.
The original.
Bedrock
well.
artesian drilled well.
Yeah, okay. That's
It's a good well.
It is a good well. Okay. This property has been designed to serve the residents of the town of Tilton as a senior center with the capability of preparing and serving meals. Allowing this variance would subject the bedrock artesian drilled well to pollution from odor oil, motor oil, brake fluid, transmission fluid, antifreeze, as well as other motor vehicle solvents, and salt brine carried from the Class 2 state highway via vehicle tires onto the parking lot and from winter maintenance of the parking lot. Number 2, the kitchen area of the Tilton Senior Center is approximately 32 feet from the abutting property line where the setback variance is requested. Granting of this variance would be contrary to the public interest in that exhaust fumes and dust from the motor vehicles using the parking lot would have adverse effects on food preparation at the senior center and on the health of seniors using the center, as many suffer from conditions such as COPD, asthma, ARDS, SARS, lung cancer, certain heart conditions, and other lung breathing conditions. Number 3, the maintenance building is within 1 foot of the abutting property line where the setback variance is requested. The building is on a rock-on-ground foundation, and any excavation within 10 feet of it could cause the building to become unstable. Water erosion caused by sheet runoff from the parking lot would cause severe erosion and permanent damage to the building. Granting of the variance would be contrary to the public interest considering the large investment the public has in this municipal property. And then I've just got a statement, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would not result in an unnecessary hardship, and that the property located on Laconia Road in Tilton, New Hampshire, in the mixed-use district, tax map R9, lot 53. I had 2.1 acres. I didn't realize it had been subdivided recently because I went by the tax map. But even at its subdivided size, this parking lot would be a secondary parking lot to the commercial property would serve. It's only going to have 6 parking spaces and could easily be adjusted on the lot to comply with the zoning ordinance without granting a variance.
Done?
Done. Sort of.
Well, and these are my opinion, okay? A number of these things that you've raised, I immediately ask myself, if you have a problem with your neighbor doing it, how are you gonna function on the lot? Because you're gonna need to use the lot for the same thing, vehicles and everything else.
Our parking is on the side.
Well, maybe
Currently, the parking lot for,
Maybe
another
that's-
property that Mr. Bernard owns, his parking lot actually encroaches onto our property. So we have parking on that side of the building.
That's not the issue before us tonight. I kinda know where you're going with that, but relative to these arguments that you're making, it just occurs to me that you could have your own crowding of whatever goes into that building. They could be parking the cars in the same general area of your well. that-
If you remember what I read to you, it says, wells may not be placed within 75 feet of adjacent property which you do not control. In this instance, we are able to control the proximity of any cars parking near our well. On property we do not have control, we do not have that control. We can't put a sign up on his parking lot saying, don't park within 75 feet of our well, don't park within 30 feet of our well. We do not have that control. We do have that control on our own property.
I understand what you're saying, however, will you exercise that control? And who is going to?
That's not the issue here.
Well, it will be though, because I can just imagine what's going to happen. There's not gonna be anybody there to tell people they can't park there whenever there's a gathering there.
Of
If
course
it's an
there is.
open area, there'll be people that will park there. I mean, I've already
We
seen
can
when we were over
control
there
our,
getting.
we have the ability to control every single bit of parking on property we
Yeah,
own.
that's the point.
I'm not questioning that you have the ability, it's a question of will you?
That-
You're
that's-
saying that you
That's a
will,
moot point.
but yet,
That's
in
not
reality, will you?
germane to this discussion. We can
It's
control that. That is a public building. It will not be open freely to the public without somebody there supervising whatever function is there. So certainly there will be a supervisor on site to control parking. At the moment, we're having a problem with parking from the abutting business that's there, which we are getting under control. But that's not the issue here. Why would you allow a variance that would further potentially contaminate our water source?
Well,
That we can
I would say
control.
anything could potentially contaminate your water source, whether it be you or whether your neighbor. I mean,
But we can
that's the
control
problem with a well.
our property.
Okay.
We cannot control.
So I
these
assume you don't
together.
want to put a driveway there either. Is that what you're saying?
That is not the discussion
Well,
here.
It is, that's
It
what we're
is.
talking about.
No, it is not
It
the
certainly
discussion.
is.
We have just gone through the argument that we can control the use of that property.
Are you,
We have not designated parking anywhere on that property as of yet. We have plenty of parking on the southwest side and the north, away from our well. We can control our well. What you're saying is maybe, could happen, but
no,
what
that's
I'm
what
telling
you're
you.
saying.
No, I'm
You-
telling
you
you that
certainly
we
are.
have the control of our property.
You
We
certainly
do
are.
not have the control of the abutting property.
She's right. She's absolutely right
About what?
about
Oh,
control.
about control. Oh, no question about that. The question is, will you exercise that
That's
control?
not the point.
Of course we
That's-
will.
that's
We would not, we
germane
would
to
not,
this discussion.
we
No,
would
it's
not do anything to pollute our water source.
And I think that you're getting away from
Yeah.
what's at hand here tonight in what's pertinent to his variance. And I have a concern, even though I would really love to work out a parking agreement with Mr. Bernard, because there is a serious parking issue over there. There's no doubt about it. My concern is, and I will reemphasize it over and over and over again until I'm heard, that on the Route 3 side, where he wants to put some parking, he has bulldozed over an area that is just beneath the building, our building, so it would be in this area here. We put a floor in this part of the building here. In order for us to put a floor in this side of the building, that corner, this corner had to be jacked up 11 inches
Yeah.
because of the ground.
Yeah, I remember.
There are 3 trees here, pines,
Right.
that are leaning this way towards our property, that there's probably, a 20-foot drop, at least,
That's a good job.
straight down And his driveway, where he bulldozed, comes right up to that banking.
I didn't bulldoze there.
Well, somebody
What are you talking
bulldozed.
about? Where are you talking about?
Right in the bottom over here, in the back of this building.
I-
That's all bulldozed now, right here. I'm very concerned that if we
Grading.
have a rain or a washout, those trees, number one, are gonna come down, and this is gonna be. In addition to that, if you put parking here where he wants to put parking, now that ground is even more weighted down with vehicles, and it's going to affect this banking here. That's my concern.
That banking is actually on his property, is it not?
Correct.
Boy.
Yes, it is. If you
So is,
look at this corner
there's no
pin here,
vegetation on that now, it's just open ground?
it's very little vegetation. There's a couple of two probably good-sized pines. One
Yeah,
is
I know the pines,
leans
yeah.
like this,
Right, right.
and another one pretty up straight, but you can see the roots on it. So my concern is, we've already done this to our building, and, 10 or 11 inches in this
Yeah.
corner is quite a considerable, I suppose not over the years how many years it's been in existence, but if you now put vehicles up to the end here, you're now weighting this portion down where this has been bulldozed here. That's my concern. And you have a good rain or a good wash or heavy snow, whatever. That, I'm really concerned about that.
Rightfully so.
Now, on the opposite side, John and I have been in communication. We'd love to work it out. There's definitely a parking issue there, and I'd love to work that out. But this here, I'm really concerned with our building. And some of what Catherine has said, I wholeheartedly agree. It is really, really close.
What is the purpose of that building anyway?
We have, right now, we have the end building with the sliding doors. We probably have about 300 pieces of medical equipment that we have a medical equipment loan program right now, and that's where we house it. Some of our doors and windows, because of our grants, we have to save, New Hampshire Preservation for Historic Buildings, we have to save those.
Yeah.
So that's in there. A lot of what we took out of the kitchen right now is in there, but we're making provisions with the selectmen to see what we can dispose of and what we can't. So that's in the process, but, we got a donation to put the floor in, and Tom Gallant's donated the labor, and we got the floor in, and that's what's currently in there. So it's gonna eventually house nothing but medical equipment. So
Okay, I'm just curious what.
we now have a
purpose it
ramp, a handicap ramp out back there too, so, it's in and out. Where people can go out back, and it's probably from the handicap ramp to the back of that banking, it's probably about 30 feet. Coffee.
I think Mr. Bernard wanted to rebut.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't even know where to begin. I feel like I was a filibuster right there. The time is up and we all get to go home now. First of all, the first thing I want to point out is that 6 cars, we're parking 6 cars, to say that was going to increase the danger of that well is almost to myself difficult to understand when they're on a road that probably has 3,000 or 4,000 cars a day on it. So I really don't understand how that argument is. And the fact is that where they park now and where they have been parking, they park right up to the well with construction vehicles. I have photographs of it. I would be happy to prove it. So the fact that they're saying that someone's going to be there to manage it, it's not happening now, but it's going to happen sometime in the future. The fact is we have a limited budget in this town, we have limited means, and we're not going to set somebody up there. So I find that not a solid argument. The other thing is that the banking that is existing there and how the contours exist right now is how I received the property. I haven't done anything to that. One of the things that I do have some rights left with this property would be to remove the trees that you're talking about. Those trees have stumps that have grown underneath your little building there. If I decided to go in there, which I believe I still have the rights to go cut down trees and de-stump them in a setback, I'm not sure. You can't even go in there and cut a tree down in a setback anymore?
Not if the tree is encroaching on the abutting property.
Sure you
Now
can.
you have a tree on a property line.
You can cut your own tree down, then you certainly can.
I feel as if my rights have been trampled on here,
Well,
and
I don't know about that yet, but I mean, it appears as though there's a tendency in that direction. Okay, and I mean, yes, you are the property owner and you do have certain rights, and, you know, I can recognize that to be a fact. But at the same time, I mean, you make valid points, but you're drawing certain assumptions. You're trying to make it sound as though it could be a lot worse than it is, than it's proposed to be, when it comes to contamination, is what I'm getting at.
I am just citing you DES regulations
Exactly.
and laws.
I agree. I
And,
mean, the
you know,
rules are there, the rules are there about cutting trees on property lines, too.
On property lines, yes.
And I agree with you on that. You gotta be careful where you go with that.
No, we're not talking about on property lines, we're talking about on his property.
On my
Oh,
property.
yeah.
But it
On my
encroaches on our,
If it
roots
encroaches on
do.
the opposite.
the roots
That's on a
but
property line.
encroaches on our property
There
line.
are rules pertaining to
They're
that.
very.
anyways, that's a whole nother issue. But as far as the trees being removed, I believe in this United States of America, I still can go cut a tree on my property. I believe I can. Maybe you guys gonna tell me something different, but I believe that I
Of
can.
course you can.
Okay, well, that's
If
really
it's
the
not
question.
encroaching on the.
If they don't encroach on the others, but as much as 6 more cars being parked there are gonna contaminate a well, which has been there for 30 years, and cars parked right into their parking right now, when they come off the road, is right to the well. That's where they're parking.
They're on an impervious surface, are they not?
They are.
His clients and his business were parked on our well, all the way up to the outbuilding in our backyard, until we informed them that that was our well.
You know,
You have the septic, are you tied into municipal sewage there? So the septic system behind
This
the
was
building
before we were tied in.
let
is,
me ask a question
back there
here.
anymore?
Sorry.
No,
Let me
it's
ask-
not, we're tied in, Bob.
If I hooked you guys onto city water, would that help you?
That doesn't resolve the issue of the outbuilding.
It resolves the issue of the well,
But there are many more issues than just the well.
but that issue, would that be resolved?
That's not a decision for us to make. The building is owned by the town of Samington, we'd have to, Tilton, we'd have to talk to.
I was
the
just saying,
board.
well, you know,
But I think,
Well,
really what's,
You know, I think before we go any further, I'm gonna
thank
stop
you.
everything, not close it to the public, but I'm gonna stop everything for a moment. I wanna discuss something with the board. We were remiss in the beginning of this applicant, advising him that he had an option of continuing until we had a full board.
That's
Okay.
true.
And
True.
at this point in time, before we go any further, I think he should be offered that option.
He
And,
should, he should, because he's going forward, so.
yes,
There is a quorum, but he's still going forward.
right.
I agree.
Did you hear that?
I did,
You understand what we're getting at?
I did, I'll take that option.
You wanna take that option and
I
come
do.
back,
I do,
continue it?
I do,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, then that is the way we'll go at this point in time. But, that is something that should have been mentioned in front. We don't know how it would have come out if we had done it in the beginning, but it certainly does have a bearing, and it certainly would be cause for a rehearing anyway, if we went ahead with it at this point in time. Everybody clear on that?
yes,
Okay. What,
would it be inappropriate for me at this time to deliver you information from the Conservation Commission pertaining to this property?
not really, I don't think we should receive any more. I think it should stop right here and now.
That's my question.
And I mean, it's our fault, I guess, for not doing it, because we went right from one end to the other, assuming that had been said to the first person, they declined the option.
Gus, would you just make sure that I at least offer?
Well, that was gonna be one of my questions, because my concern was whether or not the Conservation Commission had submitted any, or had met with Mr. Bernard about this, so.
I would like
We
to-
can deal with that if he comes back again, yeah,
Well,
certainly.
what I'd like,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
what I'd like to see is, being as there has been some conversation relative to the weight of the vehicles on this area in question, I'd like to see some kind of an engineering report as to whether there really is a danger to that,
Yeah.
having an effect on that property.
Okay, fair
Because
enough,
having looked at the property myself, it does look like it will be a filled area,
right?
okay? And obviously, you're not going to disturb what's there, it's going to be piled on top. So if
Correct.
anything, that almost seems to me like it's building it up stronger, okay? But I think if you would
Okay,
look at that, and when we continue this to next month, hopefully we'll have a full board next month,
okay.
and we can move forward at that point in time.
Yeah.
I
Okay?
have a question.
Sure.
There were 2 case numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Is there not one for the Route 3 side of the property?
No,
No.
2 case numbers, the first thing I was
So you're
asking.
only talking about the Grange Road side of the property?
Yes. The
Correct.
2 cases, one was an appeal for an administrative decision, and the other was for a variance of the same property.
Okay.
So that being said, we'll terminate everything at this point in time, and we can carry it on.
Thank you for your time.
Next,
February
next
21st,
February 21st,
6:05 p.m.
will be first on the agenda,
Okay.
and we'll move forward with it from there.
All right, it's gonna be a lot of fun, I can't wait for the next one.
And it's all uphill from here.
Will that give you time to see a structure or?
Yeah.
So on?
No problem. Thank you.
Sorry, it,
Yeah, I don't, these 2 guys have been following me around every meeting, and I don't understand what it's all about, but
We're your butters
I thought you said that you couldn't make a decision with the town.
on whether or not to allow you to hook us up to water.
Just eliminate one of the parking spaces by the well, and it's all set.
well, and
No,
we're not
no,
just
no.
talking about the parking,
I know.
we're talking
It
about
was just a
the
thought.
driveway.
I don't know what you guys really want to do with this.
You also have a driveway running.
Both of us mentioned that it's not a usable thing.
Yeah. It's an issue. It's a,
I mean, I guess,
did you have a nice Christmas?
is the video on?
Quiet.
Let's turn that off.
Yeah, actually, that's better.